My name is Ava Ryan. I'm 31 years old. And earlier this year, my parents rang my doorbell, for the first time in 13 years. They were not there to apologize. My mother stepped into my hallway, smiled like no time had passed at all, and said, "Your brother starts college next year. Give him this apartment, so he can get used to it." My father stood behind her, nodding like this was the most reasonable request in the world. So I answered, "Or you could kick him out like you did to me and let him figure it out himself." My mother called me heartless. My father called me ungrateful. My brother texted me that same night to say I owed them. But here's what none of them knew. 1 week later, a clerk at the county recorder's office would slide 2 pages across a counter toward me, and my quiet little family would never survive what was printed on them. Welcome back to Calm Revenge Stories. This channel is where quiet people finally tell the family stories they kept to themselves for years and where boundaries get the last word. If you've ever been told you owe your family everything, this one is for you. Drop a comment below with where you're watching from. And be sure to subscribe because you're going to want to hear how this ends. Let me back up to that Saturday morning. 9 o'clock, 2 knocks, then the bell. I opened the door and there they were. My mother, Aiden, held a plate of banana bread like a peace treaty. My father, Frank, had his arms crossed before he even said hello. 13 years of silence, and they walked in like they had been over for dinner last week. My mother toured my living room with her eyes. She priced the couch. She priced the curtains. Then she got to it. "It just makes sense, honey. You're alone here. 2 bedrooms, for 1 person. Liam needs a real start." I asked where I was supposed to live. She waved a hand like the question was rude. "You could rent something small. You're used to hard times." He isn't. My father finally spoke and it was an order, not a request. "Your brother starts college next year. This is what the family needs from you." The family. That word did something to my spine. I thought about the last thing this family needed from me 13 years ago and what it had cost. So, I kept my voice level and said it. "Or you could kick him out like you did to me and let him figure it out himself." The banana bread hit my counter with a thud. My mother's eyes filled on cue, right on schedule, tears at the ready like she kept them in her purse. "How can you be so selfish, Ava? It's just an apartment." My father pointed a finger at my face and told me my mother had sacrificed everything for me. I opened the door for them. That night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. "This is Liam. Mom's right. You owe us." You're probably wondering what I meant at the door. So, here is the part of the story I don't tell people. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Ohio, the first child of Frank and Aiden Ryan. My brother Liam came along when I was 14. And 2 weeks after my high school graduation, I came home from my shift at the diner and found boxes on the front porch. My boxes, my clothes, my books, my yearbook, packed by someone else's hands and stacked by the door like a donation drop. My mother stood on the steps with her arms folded. I asked what was happening and she said the sentence I have heard in my head for 13 years. "We can only afford one future." I remember laughing because I thought it had to be a joke. It wasn't. My father came out and explained calm as a man reading a receipt that I was 18 now, legally an adult and legally they were done. My old bedroom was already becoming a study room for Liam. He was 4. He needed space to grow, my mother said. Room for his little desk, his little books, his big future. I asked where I was supposed to sleep that night. Nobody answered. Here's the detail that still gets me. That same month, while I was sleeping in my car behind the diner, my parents put a down payment on a new truck. They weren't broke. They had simply done the math, and I had been rounded down. By the end of that week, my mother had taken my photos off the stairway wall. Every one of them, Somebody at church asked her about me once, and she said I'd run off on my own. That was the story. But there was one person in town who knew better. My grandfather, Noah Ryan, was my father's father, and he was everything my father was not. He was 69 that summer, a retired carpenter with sawdust in his flannel and a handshake like a vice. When he heard where I'd been sleeping, he drove his pickup to the diner, put my boxes in the bed without a word, and took me to his house on Maple Street. I stayed in his spare room for 8 months. He never once made me feel like charity. He made me feel like family, which by then felt rarer. Every morning, he'd tap the kitchen table and say the same thing while I sorted my paychecks and bills into envelopes. Paper remembers what people forget. Ava, keep every receipt of your life. He was furious with my father. I heard him on the phone one night, his voice low and hard, saying, "A man who empties his daughter's room hasn't got a son's name coming to anything of his." My mother's response was to keep Liam away from him. She told the family Noah had chosen sides. He had, and he never apologized for it. One evening, he found me crying over a community college application I couldn't afford, and he slid it back across the table with a check paperclip to the corner. "This is a loan," he said, at 0% payable in visits. Then he looked around that little house at the workshop outback and the oak floors he'd laid himself, and said something I filed away as an old man being kind. "This house will keep you safe someday, sweetheart." I didn't know then that his promise had been written down, and I didn't know what my parents would one day do to bury it. The next 13 years are the part of my life I'm actually proud of. So, forgive me if I linger a minute. I waited tables at night and took classes in the morning, community college first, then a state school, one course at a time, paying cash. It took me 6 years to finish a 4-year accounting degree, and I have never once been embarrassed by that math. I passed my exams, got hired at Hartwell & Boone, a small firm downtown, and worked my way up to senior accountant. I found out I was good at it. Numbers don't play favorites. Numbers don't pack your boxes. A spreadsheet has never once told me it could only afford one future. At 28, I signed my name about 40 times in a title office and walked out the owner of a 2-bedroom condo in the middle of Cedar Falls. I stood in the empty living room that first night with a folding chair and a pizza, and I listened to the deadbolt click. The first door that ever locked on my side. People at work teased me because I keep every document 7 years sorted and labeled exactly like my grandfather taught me. I do spreadsheets for fun. It's cheaper than therapy, and the numbers never lied to me. Through all of it, I kept one thread to my old life, and it was Noah. Sunday dinners at Maple Street, pot roast, cribbage, his terrible opinions about my terrible dates. He paid that college money forward in visits, just like he said, until his knees went and then his heart started too. I had a good life, a quiet, paid-for, hard-won life. The crack in it started, like most cracks in my family, at a funeral. Noah died 3 years ago at 82 in his sleep. In the house he built his life around. I was 28. At the funeral home, my mother ran everything. She'd appointed herself director of grief. She hugged me in front of everyone long enough for the room to see it and whispered that we should be a family again, today of all days. Then she steered me to a side table, the guest book. "Sign it nice and big, honey. You know how Grandpa loved your handwriting." Afterward, she put a stack of blank thank you cards in front of me. "Sign these, too. Just your name. Olivia's going to mail them, for us." Olivia Nathan was her best friend from church, a soft-spoken woman who did notary work out of her kitchen. I signed the book. I signed the cards. It was a funeral. You don't audit a funeral. A few weeks later, I asked my mother about Noah's estate, about the house on Maple Street, because he'd once told me things I hadn't forgotten. She sighed like I'd asked something and I mean this sincerely. It's my favorite smell on earth. Public records don't cry. Public records don't call you selfish. They just sit there being true. I asked the clerk to pull the property index for the Maple Street address, and there it was in black and white. 3 years ago, title transferred from the estate of Noah R. Ryan to Frank Ryan, my father, sole owner, and recorded right along with the transfer sat a document I had never seen in my life. One page titled Disclaimer of Interest. The person disclaiming, renouncing, walking away from any inheritance from Noah R. Ryan was listed as Ava R. Ryan, my name. And at the bottom, above a notary seal, sat a signature that was supposed to be mine. I want to be precise here because precision is my whole personality. I have never signed a disclaimer. I have never seen a disclaimer. Until that morning, I could not have told you what a disclaimer of interest was. I paid the fee for certified copies of the deed, the disclaimer, and the probate filings. The clerk said processing and mailing would take about 5 business days. I thanked her in a voice I didn't recognize. It took every one of those 5 days to keep my hands steady. Waiting is its own kind of loud. For 5 days, I went to work, reconciled other people's accounts, and lived inside my own head. I kept replaying the funeral. My mother's hand on my shoulder steering. Sign it nice and big. Honey, the stack of thank you cards. Sign these too, just your name. At the time, it had felt like grief chores. Now it felt like something else. And I couldn't prove what. We can only afford one future. I heard that sentence again every night that week, except now it had a different shape, less like a memory and more like a business plan. On day 2, my mother texted, "Sunday dinner, don't embarrass your father." I didn't answer. On day 3, I went into my closet and pulled the banker's box where I keep my old records because I keep everything. 7 years sorted and labeled. Thank you, Grandpa. I was looking for one specific folder, and my pulse was doing something unprofessional while I looked because a date had been scratching at the back of my brain since the recorder's office. The disclaimer had been notarized in March, 3 years ago. I knew that month. I knew it the way you know your own birthday. I found the folder, opened it at my kitchen table, and read it twice. Then I closed it, sat back, and laughed once out loud alone in my kitchen, and it was not a happy sound. I'm not going to tell you what was in the folder, yet because I didn't tell anyone yet. Accountants check the numbers first, then check them again. When the envelope of certified copies finally arrived, I opened it at that same table. The date on the notary stamp was the number that broke everything. The certified copies were crisp and stamped and horrible. There was my name typed out. I, Ava R. Ryan, being an heir of Noah R. Ryan, deceased, do hereby disclaim any and all interest in the estate. And there was the signature. I'll be honest with you, it was good. It leaned the way my signature leans. It looped the way I loop when I'm signing something casual. A birthday card, a guest book, not the tight version I use on tax filings. Seeing your own handwriting on a lie is a special kind of violation. It's like hearing your own voice confess to something you didn't do. Notarized and sworn before Olivia Nathan. Notary public on March 14th, 3 years ago. Olivia Nathan, my mother's church friend, the kitchen table notary. Monday morning, I took a personal day and sat in the office of Ethan Jennings, a probate and real estate attorney a partner at my firm recommended. Ethan is my age, wears reading glasses on a chain, and listens like a court reporter. She explained it plainly. A disclaimer means an heir steps aside, and their share flows to the next person in line. My grandfather's only child, my father. If that signature is forged, the transfer was built on fraud. She said, we can petition to reopen the estate and ask the court to set it all aside. Then she took her glasses off. But forgery is a strong word, Ava. Courts want proof, not feelings. I need 2 things. Proof you couldn't have signed on that date. And I want to know whether Noah left a will. I slid my folder across her desk and said I could do better than proof I couldn't have signed. She opened it, read, for a moment, and smiled. While Ethan started her quiet work, my mother escalated her loud work. Wednesday at 11 in the morning, she appeared in the lobby of Hartwell and Boone carrying a tin of cookies and wearing her church face. I heard her before I saw her. She was telling our receptionist at Volume that she just missed her daughter so much that families shouldn't be strangers. And then, as two of the partners walked through, she raised it a notch. I keep praying she'll change her mind. She's letting her baby brother start college homeless. Heads turned. That was the point. Heads turning was always the point. I came out, took her gently by the elbow, and walked her toward the door while she performed a wounded mother for an audience of accountants. At the threshold, she dropped the sweetness, for a second just for me, and said, "I'll come every week until you remember you have a family." I held the door and kept my voice at room temperature. "You may leave the cookies. The performance goes with you." Her jaw tightened, the smile snapped back on, and she swept out, blessing everyone in the lobby on her way. I stood there doing breathing math. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. My boss, Mr. Hartwell, a man who says maybe 9 sentences a year, stopped next to me at the window. "My mother-in-law pulled the same act for a decade," he said quietly. "Hold your line." Then he took a cookie, nodded like we'd concluded a meeting, and went back to his office. That night, my father called. No voicemail this time. He waited until I answered. And what he had for me wasn't a request, and it wasn't a demand. It was a date. Family meeting. My father said, "End of next month, the whole family will be there. You'll explain yourself, or as far as this family is concerned, you're out of it for good. I want you to appreciate the poetry of that threat. Being thrown out of a family that already threw me out. My parents really do love a rerun." I said I'd think about it, which, for some reason, made him angrier than a no. Meanwhile, my mother worked the phones like a campaign office. By midweek, the story circulating through the family was that Ava had gone cold and strange, that Ava was abandoning Liam, that poor Aiden was losing her second child to selfishness. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since a wedding texted me a single thumbs down emoji, which honestly remains my favorite piece of correspondence from this entire saga. Then, Aunt Emma called again, and this call was different. She was quiet for a second and then she said, "I've known Aiden 30 years. I know the weather report version of her." "What aren't they telling me, Ava?" I came close to telling her everything right then, but I've been an accountant too long. You don't publish the audit until the numbers tie out. All I said was, "Come to the meeting, Emma. Please just come." She said she wouldn't miss it. And there was something in her voice that sounded like a woman rebalancing her own books. Friday afternoon, Ethan called my office line. 2 things came in, she said. The certified employment records you requested and an answer on the notary. I asked which one she wanted to start with, and she said, "Bring everything from March, 3 years ago, tomorrow. You're going to want to see this side by side." Saturday morning, Ethan laid 2 stacks of papers side by side on her conference table and turned them to face me like place settings. On the left, the certified copy of the disclaimer of interest signed supposedly by me, notarized in person by Olivia Nathan in Cedar Falls, Ohio on March 14, 3 years ago in person. That's what the notary block swears, that the signer appeared before her, presented identification, and signed in her presence on that day in this town. On the right, my folder, the one I'd pulled from my closet that March, our firm sent me to the regional accounting conference in Columbus, 2.5 hours away. The records don't whisper, they shout. Conference badge scans with timestamps. Morning and afternoon sessions. March 13th through 16th, a hotel folio, 3 nights, check out on the 17th, my name, my card. An expense report filed that same month, approved and signed by a partner. Mileage both ways. On March 14th, at the exact hour a notary in Cedar Falls swore I was standing in front of her. I was 200 miles away asking a question about agricultural depreciation in a hotel ballroom. There are witnesses. There are timestamps. There is a continental breakfast receipt. Ethan tapped the notary seal with one finger. This isn't a feeling anymore, Ava. This is provable. Then she said the notary's journal was next because Ohio notaries keep records. And Olivia Nathan was about to have a very bad month. I sat there looking at those two stacks, the stamp and the badge, the lie and the ledger. For 13 years, they'd called me the family failure. That afternoon, I learned they had needed my name badly enough to steal it. Before I tell you what that notary's little book revealed, let me ask you something. Have you ever found out your own name was used without you? My hands shook for an hour that day. If you're still with me, type paper remembers in the comments and subscribe because what my mother did next made the forgery look polite. Ethan walked me through the road ahead the way I walk clients through an audit. Step 1, demand the notary journal. Step 2, a handwriting examiner comparing the disclaimer against real exemplars, my bank signature cards, my license, a decade of documents. Step 3, find out whether Noah left a will because a forged disclaimer was ugly enough, but a buried will would change what I was owed entirely. Do you know who did his legal work? She asked. I didn't. But I knew the next best thing. My grandfather never mailed a document in his life without complaining about it to somebody first. And the somebody was always Caleb. Hobbs, his neighbor, his chess partner, his best friend, for 40 years. If Noah had ever sat at a lawyer's desk, Caleb had heard the whole story twice with editorial. Before I left, Ethan took her glasses off again, which I'd learned meant the billable pleasantries were over. Once we file, there's no family dinner that fixes this. She said, you'd be accusing your parents of fraud in public record in the town they live in. I need to know you're ready to sue your own parents. I looked at my phone. My screensaver is the photo from the day I got my condo keys. Me alone in an empty living room, grinning at a folding chair. Nobody from my family had ever seen that apartment until the day they came to take it. They sued my childhood first, I said. I'm just filing the response. Ethan nodded and put her glasses back on. Court was back in session. That evening, I drove out past the edge of town to a little blue house with a chessboard on the porch and knocked on Caleb Owen's door. Caleb Owen is 79 years old and answers his door like he's been expecting you for years. When he saw me, he didn't even look surprised. He looked relieved. Noah said you'd come, he said. I just figured it'd be sooner. He sat me at his kitchen table, poured coffee strong enough to file taxes on its own, and told me things I never knew. That in his last year, when the hospital stays ran together, and my visits kept landing on his bad days, my grandfather wrote me letters. He mailed them to my parents' address, the only one he could put his hands on after his address book got lost in the shuffle. That he never got a single answer back. That it broke something in him. And Caleb had finally told him, Noah, stop mailing that house. Nothing comes out of that house. So Noah stopped mailing and started building. Caleb shuffled into his back room and came out carrying a small cedar box, dovetailed corners, sanded smooth, the kind of thing my grandfather could make in an afternoon and make perfect. He finished it about a month before he passed. Told me when Ava comes around asking questions, and she will because she's the only one in that family who checks the math, you put this in her hands. I opened it at Caleb's table because my own hands wouldn't wait. Inside was a letter, several pages, my name on the front in his blocky carpenter's print, and underneath it, a business card, for Whitfield Law, an office downtown with a handwritten note on the back in the same print. Will executed and on file here. Ask for the original. I read only the first line of the letter that night because the first line was enough. The house on Maple Street is yours when I'm gone. Paper remembers Ava. Here's the complication. Whitfield Law didn't exist anymore. Mr. Whitfield had retired to Florida. The office was a nail salon now, and his client files had been transferred to another firm, for safekeeping, which is standard, and standard means slow. Ethan filed the requests and told me to breathe. While we waited, my mother poured gasoline on the town. She posted a photo of Liam on the church group page, 17 years old, in his backpack with a caption asking for prayers for her sweet boy facing college with no place to live. No place to live. He lived in a 4-bedroom house. The casserole ladies didn't know that, and the comments filled up with hearts and amens, and one woman asking, "What kind of sister does this?" My father did his part, too. Emma told me he was holding court at the auto shop, telling customers his daughter had finally come around and was signing her condo over to Liam any day now. He'd already promised it to him. That's how sure they were. And then Emma told me something I didn't expect, and I want to share it because it's the only piece of this that ever made me feel anything other than cold. When my mother was 20, her own parents put her things in garbage bags and changed the locks. Over a boyfriend? Over nothing, over being 20. She waited tables, too. She swore her son would never feel poor for one single day of his life. Somewhere in there, Emma said quietly, she decided you were the price. Then Emma went quiet and told me the part that shamed her. After Noah died, Aiden had come to her kitchen table with paperwork and a story about debts, and Emma had signed away her own share of the estate to make things easy for Frank. Her signature was real. Apparently, mine was the only one they had to manufacture. It explains her. It does not excuse her. Ask me how I know the difference. That Friday, Liam texted me a photo of a mini fridge. Thumbs up emoji. Mom says after the meeting, the apartment's mine. She already ordered this. LOL. Saturday morning, I drove past Maple Street again. I'd started doing that. The way you check a wound. The tricycle was gone. The minivan was gone. The tenants were gone. And planted in my grandfather's front yard, in the grass he used to mow in perfect diagonals, stood a bright new sign. Coming soon, for sale. I sat in my car across the street with my hands on the wheel and did the math out loud alone because saying it made it real. They were selling Noah's house to bail out the shop and bank Liam's tuition. And they still wanted my condo, for him to live in, the house and the apartment, both my inheritance to fund him, my home to house him, and me presumably grateful somewhere in a rented room used to hard times. Monday, Ethan called before 9, and her voice had changed gear. The transferred files had come through. Ava Noah Ryan executed a will. The original is on file, properly witnessed, never revoked. I'm holding a copy. I asked the only question that mattered. The house on Maple Street, she read to my granddaughter, Ava R. Ryan. There it was. Not a promise from a kind old man. A bequest in writing, buried, for 3 years under a signature I never signed. Ethan didn't let me celebrate. That sale sign changes the clock. If that house closes to an innocent buyer, unwinding this gets 10 times harder. We file now this week or you end up fighting a stranger instead of your father. So Tuesday night at my kitchen table, at the same table where I'd opened the certified copies, I read the petition one final time and signed it. My signature, mine to give, for once. Wednesday morning, Ethan filed everything at the county courthouse. A petition to reopen my grandfather's estate and set aside the disclaimer as a forgery with the evidence attached as exhibits. And one more document, short and boring and devastating, called a lease penned. It's a flag on the title. It tells the world this property is in dispute. Nobody sane will close on that house until a judge rules. In plain English, the sale was frozen. By Friday, the bright new sign had disappeared from my grandfather's yard. And somewhere in town, a real estate agent was quietly deleting a listing. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't drive by my parents' house to watch. Papers don't shout. They just arrive. I went to work. I finished a client's quarterly filings. I watered the stubborn little fern on my windowsill and told it as one survivor to another that we were doing just fine. My coworkers had no idea that across town my family's version of reality had a court date. There's a particular kind of peace in doing the correct next thing quietly, and I recommend it. It drives certain people out of their minds because here's what I knew and what my parents were about to learn. Their whole system ran on nobody checking, nobody asking, nobody making it official. Feelings can be argued with and cried at and prayed over in a church group. A case number cannot. The following Tuesday, 2 processed servers with a manila envelope walked up my parents' driveway while my mother was watering her roses. They put the papers straight into her hands in full view of the whole street. Real notice delivered properly in person, which is everything my forged disclaimer never got. My phone started ringing before they got back to their car. The first call was my father and he skipped hello entirely. "What did you do?" His voice filled the car low and shaking. I said I'd asked a court to look at some paperwork. He detonated. "You're suing us? Your own parents?" Family doesn't sue family. There it was. Family doesn't sue family. I sat very still because I wanted to remember everything about the moment my father discovered rules. He roared, for a while, about lawyers and disgrace and everything he'd ever done, for me. A list that ran shorter than he expected once he started saying it out loud. He said I'd be sorry. He said if I didn't withdraw everything before the family meeting, I could forget I ever had parents. I told him gently that he was about 14 years late on that particular threat and he hung up. My mother took a different road. She always does. A voice message wet with tears, soft as a lullaby. "I don't know what's happened to you, sweetheart. You're killing your father. Is an old house really worth more than your family?" I listened to it twice because something about it was off. And on the second pass, I found it. She never asked what house. She never asked what signature. She never asked a single question because she already knew every answer. Innocent people ask questions. Guilty people ask you to stop. Late that night, one more text from Liam. "What did you do?" Mom's crying. Dad's punching walls. What signature? What are they talking us about? All those question marks. And I believed every one of them. He didn't know. 17 years old and the fridge was ordered and he genuinely didn't know. Meanwhile, Ethan had news. Olivia Nathan had been ordered to produce her notary journal. A notary's journal is the flight recorder of that little world. Date, document, signer, identification shown. Olivia Nathan kept hers the way she kept the church potluck sign-up sheet faithfully, and it had a hole in it exactly where March 14th should have been. No entry, for me. No entry, for a disclaimer. No entry, for anything that day at all. Her stamp said I stood in her kitchen and signed. Her own book said that day never happened. And when the state started asking questions because Ethan had filed a complaint with the office that licenses notaries, Olivia folded like a lawn chair. Through her own lawyer came a sworn statement, and I've read it so many times I can recite it. She stated that Aiden Ryan, her friend of 20 years, brought her a document already signed. That Aiden said her daughter was so busy, you know how the kids are, she couldn't come in person. But the family needed it notarized to settle poor Noah's affairs. That she, Olivia, stamped and signed as though I had appeared because it was Aiden, because it was church, because it was family, and who checks family. Her commission was suspended pending the state's review. I read that statement at my kitchen table and I want to be honest about what I felt. Not triumph, something colder and sadder. Olivia Nathan is not a villain. She's what my mother uses instead of tools. A soft, trusting person bent to a purpose and left to take the consequences. But the stamp was still hers. And the law thinks so, too. One question remained, and it was the last one, the signature itself. Somebody's hand held that pen and drew my name. Ethan sent the disclaimer and 10 years of my real signatures to a forensic document examiner. The answer came back in 11 days. The examiner's report ran 20 pages, but the heart of it fit in one sentence. The signature on the disclaimer was not written. It was traced. Slow, careful pen strokes were a real signature flows. Tiny stops and lifts where a hand paused to check its work. Ink pressure even and cautious from first letter to last. The fingerprint of someone drawing a picture of a signature rather than signing one. And the model they traced from matched my casual style. The loose loops I use on cards and guest books, not the tight legal signature on my bank records. When I read that line, the funeral came back to me all at once, and every piece landed where it belonged. Sign it nice and big. Honey, you know how Grandpa loved your handwriting. The guest book positioned by my mother. The stack of thank you cards. Sign these, too. Just your name. Olivia will mail them. They harvested my signature at my grandfather's funeral next to his casket. While I stood there grieving the only person in the family who ever chose me. Then they traced it onto a document that erased his last gift, and they had a kitchen table notary bless the whole thing. Ethan found one more thread while assembling exhibits. This one and the estate accounting they'd have to answer for. 3 years of rent from the Maple Street house, month after month, deposited and gone. Most of it straight into Ryan's auto. My grandfather's house had been quietly bankrolling my father's failing shop the entire time. Noah's floors, Noah's roof, Noah's oak trees, all of it milked to save a business that never once had a job or a kind word for me. And then that Thursday, my mother texted me, "Let's talk, just us women." Before Sunday, I met her at a coffee shop on Main Street, a public place on purpose, and I let her order us both terrible lattes and perform motherhood for the barista for a minute. Then she reached across the table, took my hand, and got to business. "She'd been thinking," she said. "Families fight," she said. "Nobody needs judges," she said. "Judges are for strangers." And then, with her eyes soft and shining, my mother offered me her deal. I withdraw the petition. I drop all this unpleasantness, and in return she and my father would let me keep my apartment and they'd agree never to tell the family what I'd tried to do to them. I sat with that, for a second, genuinely admiring it. The way you'd admire a counterfeit bill held up to the light. They would let me keep the apartment I bought. They would protect my reputation from the crime they committed. I said, "You're offering me my own apartment? That's generous." "Did you notarize it?" Her hand slid off mine like I'd turned hot. The softness drained out of her face, and for about 2 seconds, I got to see the woman underneath, the one who packs boxes and traces signatures. And that woman said, quiet and sharp, "You were always the difficult one. Liam is worth 10 of you." There it was. The realest thing she'd said to me in 13 years. I put $5 on the table for my latte because I pay my own way. And I stood up. "See you Sunday, Mom. Bring the family. I'll bring the paperwork." She thought Sunday was her stage. She'd built it herself. Chair by chair. Phone call by phone call. I just changed the play. My mother offered to let me keep what was already mine. Take a second and let that sentence sit. If your family has ever generously offered you your own life back, tell me in the comments and subscribe because that Sunday meeting is coming and I walked in with a folder they never saw coming. Before Sunday, there was a Thursday and on that Thursday there was a hearing. I wore my gray interview suit and sat next to Ethan at a wooden table older than the county. My parents' lawyer, a tired man who I suspect had seen the file and priced his hope accordingly, had advised them not to testify, and they didn't show at all. It went quickly. Ethan, snorts, walked the judge through it exhibit by exhibit. The disclaimer notarized in person on March 14th. The badge scans and hotel folio placing me in Columbus that entire week. Olivia Nathan's sworn statement about the document that arrived pre-signed. The examiner's finding that the signature was traced and my grandfather's will produced from the transferred files witnessed and valid, leaving the Maple Street house to me. Ethan also answered the question I'd been chewing on for weeks right there in open court. The forged disclaimer was insurance. My parents knew what Noah wanted done with that house, so they built a paper wall against the day his will surfaced. The judge, a woman about my mother's age, read the notary statement twice, looked up over her glasses, and said this was one of the cleaner forgery records she'd seen, and she did not mean it as a compliment to anyone. The disclaimer was set aside, void. The estate was reopened, the will admitted, the transfer to my father unwound. There would be more process, an accounting of 3 years of rent, fees. The state's separate file on Olivia, a referral Ethan described as out of our hands now. But the center of it was done. Noah's gift existed again. Outside on the courthouse steps, Ethan asked if I wanted to celebrate, and I said I had to get back for a client meeting, and she laughed and said I was her favorite kind of crazy. The ruling was public record. My parents told nobody. On Sunday, they set the table for a shaming mine. They had no idea whose it would be. Saturday night, Emma called one last time. They've spent all week on the phone, she said. The story now is that you abandoned Liam and attacked your father with lawyers over some old house nonsense. Tomorrow, they're going to put you in front of everyone and make you the villain. If you don't come, that's the only story anyone will ever hear. I told her I'd be there, and I asked her to do one thing, for me, no matter what she heard. Stay until the end. I spent that evening at my dining table doing what I do best. I built a binder, certified copies of the deed and the disclaimer, the conference records, Olivia's sworn statement, the examiner's report, the court's order, a copy of my grandfather's will, and on top in a plastic sleeve, his letter from the cedar box, which I had finally read all the way through twice with the kitchen quiet and his voice coming off the paper like sawdust and coffee. Each exhibit got its own tab. The tabs got colors. Accountants don't do drama. We do exhibits. In the car the next afternoon, parked down the street from the house I grew up in, I made myself one promise. Whatever they screamed, I would not scream back. Whatever my mother performed, I would not perform. Calm is the only language they never learned to fake. And I intended to be fluent in front of witnesses. I checked my lipstick, picked up the binder, and walked up a driveway I hadn't stood on in 13 years, past my father's new truck toward the sound of a house full of relatives. 16 chairs, 12 relatives, 2 liars, and 1 folder. My mother had staged the living room like a hearing she planned to win. The dining table extended with folding chairs, relatives arranged in rows. Liam seated front and center like an exhibit with a color print out of his dream college propped on the table beside a framed baby photo. The casserole ladies would have wept. Aunt Emma and Uncle Carter sat near the window. 2 of my mother's sisters had made the drive with their husbands, plus an uncle, for cousins, and a great aunt who mostly came for the pie. 12 of them, plus my parents, plus the boy the whole show was allegedly for. When I walked in, the room did that thing where the temperature drops, but everyone smiles. My father stood up like a chairman calling a meeting to order and delivered his opener. We're family here, and family doesn't sue family. But Ava has some explaining to do. Head swiveled to me. My mother dabbed her eyes and picked up the thread, her voice sweet and heartbroken. We could only ever afford one future, and Ava has never forgiven us for being poor. And now she's taking it out on her baby brother. It was masterful. 13 years of story, compressed and rehearsed, delivered to a jury she'd hand-fed, 4 weeks. Poor parents, prodigal daughter, innocent boy. I sat in the one empty chair, the binder flat on my lap, and I let her run. All of it. The sacrifice speech, the tears, the slideshow of Liam's report cards. I didn't interrupt once. A couple of relatives mistook my silence for shame, and I watched them get comfortable in it. That was fine. Rope has to be paid out before it goes tight. When she finally finished, I asked my first question. Where is Grandpa Noah's house today? That's all I asked, and I asked it in the tone I use for missing receipts. My father blinked. What does that have to do with anything? It's being sold. Estate business, debts. I nodded and asked my second question. What debts? Does anyone here remember Grandpa having debts? Can we see them? Silence did a slow lap around the room. My great-aunt frowned. Noah Ryan paid cash for his trucks and lectured people about interest rates at picnics. Everyone in that room knew it, and I watched them remember it. My father's jaw worked. The paperwork's private. Third question, still level. Who inherited the house when he passed? And here my father made the mistake I'd been quietly counting on. The mistake proud men always make. He defended himself with the truth as he'd built it. I did legally, you disclaimed. You signed the papers walking away, girl, so don't sit in my house acting robbed. A little ripple crossed the room. I heard my cousin whisper, signed what? I let the ripples settle and then in the same tone, I asked my fourth question. When did I sign them? My father opened his mouth. My mother got there first, standing, voice bright and brittle as spun sugar. This is not what today is about. She's confusing everyone. This is about Liam. And from over by the window, quiet as a page turning, came Aunt Emma's voice. Let her answer, Aiden. Every head in the room turned. My mother sat down slowly the way you sit when the floors moved. I thanked Emma, set the binder on the dining table, and opened it to the first color tab. March 14th, I said. Let's talk about March 14th. I passed the first pages to my great-aunt and asked her to hand them along when she was done. Exhibit A, a certified copy of a document called a disclaimer of interest in which Ava R. Ryan gives up everything from her grandfather's estate. Notarized in Cedar Falls on March 14th, 3 years ago, signed supposedly in person by me. The pages moved down the row of relatives like a collection plate. Exhibit B, my conference badge records and hotel folio from Columbus the same week, timestamps and all. 200 miles away, I said. 3 days of meetings, a hotel bill, and a room full of accountants who remember me. On the exact day that stamp swears I was standing in a kitchen here in town, signing my inheritance away. My uncle looked up sharply. The great-aunt put her hand over her mouth. Exhibit C. The sworn statement of Olivia Nathan, notary public, my mother's friend of 20 years, describing the document Aiden Ryan brought to her already signed and the stamp she should never have applied. At Olivia's name, one of my mother's sisters turned and stared at my mother, and my mother suddenly found the window fascinating. Exhibit D, the forensic examiner's report. The signature wasn't signed. It was traced, drawn a picture of my name, copied from the handwriting they collected at the funeral, the guest book, the thank you cards, sign it nice and big, honey, I heard somebody's breath catch, and Exhibit E, the court's order from Thursday, setting the forged disclaimer aside, and reopening the estate. Stapled behind it, the document my parents never wanted anyone to see. The last will and testament of Noah R. Ryan leaving the house on Maple Street to his granddaughter. Me. Uncle Carter read the order twice, flipped back, read it again, and set it down like it was hot. The only sound in that dining room was the kitchen clock. Liam reached across the table, picked up the will, and went white to the lips. Grandpa left it to her. Then what did I get a fridge for? And my mother came out of her chair. She didn't cry this time. She erupted. I did it for this family. Her voice cracked across the room and 30 years of church lady Polish went with it. For Liam. That house was just sitting there and you had left us. You left. And Noah was punishing us with it. And somebody had to think of this family's future. She rounded the table toward me. 30 years I sacrificed. And you sit there with your binder like a little judge. You are always cold, Ava. Always counting. My father was up too, palms slamming the table, coffee cups jumping. You want to play lawyers? I'll bury you in lawyers. I'll fight this to my last dollar. A cousin murmured that maybe everyone should sit, and he wheeled on her, too. And just like that, the room got to see the weather I grew up in. I stayed in my chair. I kept my hands folded on the closed binder. And when I spoke, I made my voice go quieter. So quiet the shouting had nowhere to land. You told me we could only afford one future. So I went and built my own. You're not taking his college from me. Mom, you already took my house. She started to answer and I continued level as a ledger line. And Dad, family doesn't sue family. Family doesn't forge family signatures either. Then I opened the binder one last time to the plastic sleeve and read a single line in the handwriting everybody in that room recognized on sight. Paper remembers what people forget. The house on Maple Street is yours. He remembered me, I said. On paper. The only place you couldn't erase me from. Nobody spoke. Then Aunt Emma stood, crossed the room in front of everyone, and sat down in the empty chair next to mine. My mother's sisters gathered their purses. The great-aunt asked Uncle Carter, in a whisper that reached every wall, to take her home. The audience my mother had spent weeks assembling stood up one by one and became witnesses on their way out. Liam bolted for the front door, and I followed him. I found him on the front porch, the same porch where my boxes once sat, stacked like a donation drop, and the symmetry of that was not lost on either Ryan child standing there. He was crying, angry about crying. 17 in every direction. I didn't know. He said about the signature, the house, any of it. They told me you walked out on us. My whole life. That's what they told me. He dug in his pocket and held out a key. My mother had given it to him weeks ago and told him it was to my building. It fits nothing I own. With her, the prop was always the point. And if you ever need one image, for this whole story, there it is. I don't want your apartment, he said. I don't want any of it now. I took the key and I looked at my little brother, this stranger I'd been robbed of along with everything else, and I gave him the truth. Short and plain. They packed my boxes 2 weeks after graduation. Grandpa took me in when nobody else would. I never walked out on anyone. I was carried out. He wiped his face with his sleeve. So, what happens to me? And there on that porch, I finally got to say the line my parents had written for me 13 years earlier, except I got to fix it. Nobody's kicking you out, Liam. That's the difference between me and them. You're 17. You get to grow up better than the people raising you. Financial aid forms open in October. I'll show you how they work. That's what I can give. Behind us, inside, my mother's voice was still going, explaining to a room that had already emptied. I drove home to my apartment, the one I bought, and turned my key in the lock, my side of the door. 13 years ago, they closed a door on me. That Sunday, every door in their house stood open, and nobody wanted to stay inside with them. Here's how the paper trail ended. The estate closed properly this time. Title to the Maple Street house was recorded in my name, the way my grandfather wrote it. My parents' lawyer negotiated a settlement on the 3 years of rent they'd collected, a repayment plan monthly with interest, plus my legal fees because my father's pride turned out to be exactly one hearing deep. Olivia Nathan lost her notary commission and the file on the forgery went where such files go to people whose job it is, and what happens with it now is not my burden to carry. Nobody went to a family court of apologies because my parents don't apologize. They updated the story instead. In the new version, they are elderly victims of an ungrateful daughter's greed and they tell it to a much smaller audience these days. The church committee quietly rotated my mother off its leadership, for her health. Some people would rather lose everyone than lose the story. And Liam. In the fall, my brother started at the state university 2 hours away. tuition covered by grants, aid, and a warehouse job he complains about beautifully. He filled out every form himself at my dining table over 2 evenings and 1 large pizza while I pointed at boxes and said helpful accountant things. He did the work. That matters to me, and someday it'll matter to him. The photo he sent me of his student ID came with a message that made me laugh in an empty kitchen. Figured it out myself mostly. As for the house, I didn't sell it and I didn't move in. Not yet. The first thing I restored was the workshop out back. His bench, his hand tools oiled and hung in their outlines. And on the stairway wall, I hung the photos my grandfather had chosen, the ones somebody else once took down. There's one of me at 18 on his porch, boxes at my feet, smiling. Anyway, he kept it all those years. Paper remembers. So did he. People ask if I've spoken to my parents since. The answer is that my life now has a working front door and it works the same, for everyone. My father's number stays blocked. My mother mailed me a long letter around the holidays and I returned it unopened, not out of spite, but out of arithmetic. Every version of her story, so far has cost me something, and I no longer extend credit on that account. Reconciliation requires 2 honest people, and at the moment, I can only vouch for one of us. I keep my calendar open. I don't hold my breath. Liam comes by on his school breaks. He MS the grass at Maple Street in wobbly diagonals that would make our grandfather wheeze and then hide a smile. And afterward, we eat sandwiches on the porch. And sometimes he asks about Noah and I tell him the true stories he was owed all along. That's the family I have. And it's small and it's honest and it's enough. I live between 2 addresses now. The condo I earned with 10 years of night shifts and careful math. And the house I was loved enough to be given by a carpenter who wrote his promises down. Both of them with locks that turn from my side. If someone ever shows up at your door demanding the life you built, remember this. Love that arrives with a moving truck, for your things was never love. And paper kept patiently remembers what people forget. That's my story. 1 doorbell, 1 traced signature, and 1 cedar box that waited 3 years to tell the truth. If this reminded you to keep your own records or to stop apologizing for your own front door, take it as a sign. Share this video with someone who needs it. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done at that family meeting.